In just 47 seconds, $12.8 billion in EU recovery funds vanished into bureaucratic limbo. Giorgia Meloni didn't wait for diplomatic protocols. She leaned into the microphone at Palazzo Chigi and delivered the nuclear option. The cameras zoomed in. The Brussels correspondents froze. What did the Italian Prime Minister reveal that made the entire European Commission's credibility collapse in real time? I watched from the press gallery as Meloni stepped to the podium at exactly 3:17 p.m. Rome time. She carried no prepared remarks. Instead, she held a single sheet marked with the EU Commission seal and a timestamp that would change everything. September 28, 2025, 11:42 p.m. Brussels time. The room was packed with international media expecting routine updates on economic reforms. Nobody anticipated what would become the most devastating 12-minute press conference in recent European political history. Meloni began with calculated calm. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 days ago, I received a document every European taxpayer deserves to see. Her voice carried the authority that had propelled her from opposition to Italy's most powerful woman. But there was something else. The quiet confidence of someone holding a royal flush. The document she raised was an internal European Commission audit report, leaked from the Berlaymont building, detailing systematic mismanagement of next-generation EU recovery funds. It bore von der Leyen's signature. I want to read paragraph 4.2 exactly as it appears, Meloni continued, scanning the stunned journalists. Quote, due to procedural irregularities, $12.8 billion allocated for Southern European infrastructure remain in suspension. President von der Leyen has authorized temporary reallocation to discretionary climate initiatives pending review. End quote. The silence wasn't just journalistic surprise, it was a political earthquake beginning to rumble. Every reporter understood the implications immediately. Von der Leyen had confiscated Italian recovery money and redirected it to pet projects without parliamentary approval. But Meloni wasn't finished. She had planned this ambush with surgical precision. The timestamp on this authorization shows 11:42 p.m. That's interesting because at 11:45 p.m. on the same night, the Commission issued a press release celebrating a new $13 billion climate adaptation program. The math, as they say, is quite simple. I could see Brussels correspondents frantically typing, phones buzzing with urgent newsroom calls. This wasn't just Italian news anymore. This was a direct assault on the European Union's most powerful institution. The political calculus was ruthless. Meloni had positioned herself as defender of Italian taxpayers against Brussels bureaucracy, while exposing von der Leyen as either incompetent or deliberately deceptive. Either way, the Commission president's position had become untenable in 47 seconds. I have additional documentation, Meloni announced, producing a second folder. Email exchanges between Commission staff and external consultants discussing the Meloni problem and strategies for financial discipline enforcement. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like poison gas. These emails were sent 6 weeks before Italy submitted our recovery plan modifications. The room erupted. Hands shot up across the gallery, voices overlapping in multiple languages, cameras clicking rapidly. But Meloni raised her hand for silence and got it. The authority was undeniable. The European Commission has 48 hours to release the complete audit findings to the public, restore Italy's rightful allocation, and provide a full accounting of where our $12.8 billion actually went. If they refuse, Italy will consider this a breach of treaty obligations and act accordingly. The threat was unmistakable. Italy was prepared to escalate this to the European Court of Justice, potentially triggering the biggest institutional crisis since Brexit. Von der Leyen wasn't just facing embarrassment, she was staring down the barrel of a constitutional showdown that could unravel her entire presidency. I watched the reactions spread through the room like wildfire. The German correspondents looked physically ill. The French reporters were already speed-dialing Paris. The Spanish delegation was whispering urgently among themselves. Everyone understood that this wasn't just about Italian recovery funds anymore. This was about whether the European Commission could survive having its financial credibility destroyed in broad daylight. The beauty of Meloni's strategy was its simplicity. She had taken the European establishment's favorite weapon, technocratic complexity, and turned it against them. By reducing the entire scandal to basic arithmetic, she had made it impossible for Brussels to hide behind bureaucratic jargon. 12.8 billion was missing. Von der Leyen had signed the authorization. The timestamps didn't lie. As the press conference dissolved into chaos, I noticed something telling about the physical dynamics in the room. The Italian journalists were energized, sensing a major victory for their prime minister. The European correspondents looked like they were attending a funeral. Their own. The Brussels-based reporters were already calculating how to spin this disaster for their EU-friendly publications. But the most revealing detail was what happened in the final moments. As Meloni prepared to leave, a journalist from Politico Europe shouted the question everyone was thinking. "Prime Minister, are you prepared to trigger Article 7 proceedings against the Commission?" Meloni paused at the exit, turned back to the microphone, and delivered the kill shot. Article 7 is for member states that violate European values. We're dealing with an institution that has violated European law. That requires a different remedy entirely. The implication was crystal clear. Italy wasn't just threatening legal action. They were questioning the fundamental legitimacy of von der Leyen's leadership. In the brutal arithmetic of European politics, legitimacy equals power. Without legitimacy, the Commission president becomes a lame duck overnight. Within minutes, the digital battlefield exploded. Meloni vs. von der Leyen began trending across European platforms. Italian Twitter erupted in celebration, supporters praising their prime minister for finally standing up to Brussels' tyranny. German and French social media took a more defensive tone, with EU supporters dismissing the allegations as populist theater. But the financial markets told a different story. The euro dropped 0.3% against the dollar within an hour. Italian bond spreads tightened as investors interpreted the confrontation as Rome's growing confidence. Most tellingly, European Commission bonds saw their first significant sell-off in 6 months. The speed of the market reaction revealed something crucial about the current state of European politics. The old assumption that challenging Brussels was financially suicidal no longer held. Investors were beginning to price in the possibility that national governments might actually win these confrontations. By evening, the Brussels response machine was in full damage control mode. The European Commission issued a terse statement claiming that all recovery funds are managed according to strict legal frameworks and undergo regular auditing procedures. But notably absent was any direct refutation of Meloni's specific allegations about the $12.8 billion or the unauthorized reallocation. The omission spoke volumes. In high-stakes political combat, what you don't deny is often more important than what you do. Von der Leyen's team couldn't deny the basic facts because they were true. They could only hope to muddy the waters with procedural complexity and institutional double-talk. Meanwhile, Meloni's domestic approval ratings had spiked 4.2% in the 6 hours following the press conference, according to real-time polling data. Italian voters clearly appreciated seeing their prime minister take the fight directly to Brussels. The political dividend was immediate and substantial. But the broader European implications were even more significant. Other national leaders, particularly those from Central and Eastern Europe, began issuing statements requesting clarification about EU fund management. Hungary's Viktor Orbán immediately called for a comprehensive audit of all Commission financial activities. Poland's leadership expressed concern about transparency in fund allocation. The domino effect was beginning. Meloni had provided a roadmap for challenging Brussels on financial management, and other governments were preparing to follow. The most damaging aspect of the entire episode wasn't the specific allegation about the missing funds, it was the demonstration of how easily the Commission's authority could be undermined by a well-prepared national leader willing to go public with inconvenient facts. Von der Leyen's power had always depended on the assumption that member state governments would keep their complaints private, preserving the illusion of European unity. Meloni had shattered that assumption in 47 seconds. She had proven that the European Commission's authority was more fragile than anyone in Brussels wanted to admit. And once that genie was out of the bottle, it would be nearly impossible to put back. As I filed my report that evening, one detail kept haunting me. During the press conference, when Meloni had mentioned the 48-hour deadline, I had noticed something in her expression. It wasn't anger or political calculation. It was something far more dangerous: genuine confidence. She wasn't bluffing. She had more ammunition in reserve. The question now wasn't whether von der Leyen could survive this particular scandal. The question was whether she could survive the new rules of engagement that Meloni had just established. In the brutal chess game of European politics, the Italian Prime Minister had just moved her queen into position for checkmate, and from the look of panic in Brussels correspondents' eyes, everyone in that room understood that this was just the opening gambit. The era of unquestioning deference to Commission authority was officially over. The populist revolution had found its financial Achilles heel, and they weren't going to let go. For von der Leyen, the next 48 hours would determine whether she remained the president of the European Commission or became its most spectacular casualty. The countdown had begun.